everyone. My name's Karen Daly, and I'm Secretary Treasurer of the Sacramento Storytelling Guild. And I happen to be the host today. And I welcome all of you. It's so nice. We're seeing lots of people coming, and that's very exciting for us. We've got some great tellers tonight or today. The summits tonight, as our first speaker is from out of town, and it's 5 o'clock where she is. So we are very happy to welcome. And our first presenter today is Beverly Schwartz. And it says, "The story I will tell, a moment in time, it's a personal story." She's a retired elementary teacher. We have quite a few elementary teachers that are storytellers. Must be something working with children. I was the founder of the very first program I coined: science, technology, engineering, and math. And for some of us that have been working in schools, it's called the STEM program, and I was familiar with that. This program is now used worldwide. She won the 1990 Krista McAuliffe Award for developing the STEM program. Her story, A Moment in Time, is about her meeting Krista McAuliffe, mother of Grace of the Kennedy Space Center. Let's give a warm welcome for Beverly Schwartz. Beverly.
Thank you. See, this is a true story, and it's a moment in time. In 1990, I won the Krista McAuliffe Award for starting a program in 1985 that I called Learn Tech. And then as it's got more and more developed, I started calling it STEM. And the state came in, looked at it and loved it and said, you know, this should be disseminated. We'd like you to apply for the Krista McAuliffe Award. And the goal of the award is to have teachers tell of new programs they've developed so that they can disseminate it across the United States. Well, I won, and I had a real astronaut who went to RPI, which I was involved with the college in developing this program. And he came and talked to my school, and we shot off rocket ships in the back of the school, and the kids had a blast. And he came to me and he said, you know, we're going to be having an award ceremony, and I have a special favor to ask you when you get there, okay? And I'll be meeting you when you get there. I didn't ask. I figured if he wanted to tell me, he would. And I did go down, and there he was to greet me. He goes, "Come, I have a seat at my table for you. I'd like to introduce you to someone." And I go there, and this short little tiny woman. This is Grace. This is Krista McAuliffe's mother. She's the astronaut that you won the award for that passed away when her rocket ship blew up in January. Yes. So he goes, "I'd like you to sit with us for lunch." And I was seated right next to her. And she proceeded to tell me all about the Krista McAuliffe Award and how she developed it in a Massachusetts college, and that it happens every year. And she was so happy to hear about my program. But the award ceremony was wonderful. And when we were done, the astronaut came over to us and he says, "I have a special favor. Would you like to join us, Krista McAuliffe's mother, Grace, and I, on a very special tour to the back part of Kennedy Space Center, where most people aren't even taken?" I got special permission. I was so excited. The first thing I thought is, I can't wait to tell the kids back home about the tour. So off we went. Okay, we went in a van, and the first thing we saw was an igloo, and they had spaceships old spaceships that they used to blast off. And he said, "This is where we tested our spaceships to see if they blasted off, if they crashed, if they went up, the problems." And it's Globe Center because they were afraid that when you send a rocket ship up in the air, fuel comes down and it could burn you. And when I was there, I saw a real spaceship blast off, And they announced, please be careful. You need to get out of this area within 15 minutes because of the fuel coming down from the rocket ship. But they didn't know how long it would take in the first spaceship, rocket ships, that they blasted off. So they built this building and they had to lock the doors for 48 hours and stay in there. So they didn't want anybody to get hurt. Well, he says, you see the men's room and the women's room right outside the front door? Well, they would lock the doors. And when they blasted off the very first test rocket ship, about an hour or two later, someone had to go to the bathroom. But where were the bathrooms? Outside the locked door. They had to make do. The other thing was they had Squirrel Man. Well, in those days, they had extension cords going from the building to the rocket ships, real big, thick ones, but they were extension cords. And the squirrels would play around and they had this man and he would start the countdown, 30, 29, 28. One day they were all looking, they saw a squirrel loosen up the extension cords. Squirrel Man, they all shouted. He ran out, plugged it in, ran in, locked it, the door locked, and they got it blasted up in time. We heard stories like that. But we saw a lot of other things there. And then the astronaut David said, I have something very special for us to do now. We got special permission to stand on the launch pad where your daughter's rocket ship blasted off. I looked at Grace. I hope she'd be okay with this. I was a little nervous for her. I could see her tense up with her shoulders and she kind of held her stomach a little, but she didn't say a word. Well, we got into the van and we're driving towards the launch pad. He says, see those railroad tracks going by us, parallel to us? That's where they move the rocket ship up into the launch pad. They would take it and an elevator would bring it up or whatever. And we got to the launch pad. It's a little windy day and chilly. And there we stood at the bottom of this big cement ramp. And we had to walk up the ramp. Took us a few minutes until we stood on the launch pad. Now, because what I was doing back in Troy, New York with my program, my principal said the superintendent wants to see you. Was I in trouble for doing this program? I did quite a few wild things, but no. He said they're going to be blasting off a rocket ship and they wanted a teacher in space to go up to be the first teacher in space. Here's the application. I want you to fill it out. You have a good program to be disseminated. And that's what the winner was going to do is after she got back or he would go around the US and talk about their program. Well, I had put it on my kitchen table and it sat there a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks went by. And I had this pit in my stomach and finally said, why am I not doing it? And you know what? I didn't want to die in space. That's why I didn't do it. I'm glad I listened to my instincts for once. But here I was standing next to Christy McAuliffe's mother, whose daughter had the courage to do the application with a family of 2 kids, a husband, a community that loved her. And she got it and she accepted it. And I looked at her and I could tell, I saw some tears coming down her eyes and she was holding her stomach and she was looking up and I looked up and there's a window in the spaceship and that's the last thing you see before you blast off. And I said, oh my, that's the last. I looked up one more time and said, that would have been the last thing I saw in my life. So I said to Grace, Grace, would you like a few minutes alone up here by yourself? She couldn't talk. All she could do was nod. I said, listen, we'll meet you at the end of the cement ramp. You take your time. When you're ready, come on down. So the astronaut and I walked down and he went back to the car and I turned around and I looked up and she was talking to her daughter, wiped away some tears. You could see she was talking and moving her hands. After about 15, 20 minutes, I was getting a little worried and she seemed to want to get herself together and she started walking down the path. towards me. Halfway around, she stopped and she turned around and looked up. She blew a kiss towards her daughter. She was finally maybe saying goodbye that she hadn't had a chance to before. And she turned around and she started walking towards me. She was staring as she got close, straight into my eyes. And then she approached me and she gave me the biggest mother hug you'd ever imagine. And then she let go and stepped back. I held out her hand and my hand, and we held hands, and we turned around and we walked away in silence. She had said goodbye to her daughter. It was a moment in time. Thank you.
Wow, that is. What a story to start off a great program. We're going to make it hard for the rest of the tellers. Beverly, so glad you could join us.
Thank you.
Now, as I told you, I think elementary school teachers just love to tell stories, because our next speaker happens to be a retired elementary school teacher. For many years, started in a one-room classroom, believe it or not, up, I believe in cool wood, and then moved. She's going to tell us a story, a story that can be for all ages, and it's called, oh, I have to tell you, Joyce, besides being a wonderful storyteller, just happens to be our vice president of our Sacramento Storytellers Guild. And we are so lucky to have her, because all those flyers and all those public relation information you get come from Joyce. How lucky we are. So Joyce is here to tell us the story, The Old Mother Sea Turtle. The Old Mother Sea Turtle. Joyce Orman.
Thank you. This story is not a true story, and it's not a true myth. It comes about, my daughter was in Singapore for about 5 years, and she is a filmmaker. And she made a film called Traveler Log. And while she was in the South Pacific, she was diving. And in one of her films, she showed a bunch of sea turtles, huge, and they were swimming along. And she mentioned something that one of the diving guides had told her. She didn't tell very much. And so I thought, wow, that'd make a great story. So I thought there are thousands of islands in Micronesia. There must be a story there. So I went and I researched, and there are 1,000, I think there's 1,002 stories about old mother sea turtles, none of them which have anything to do with each other. So this story is a bit from here and a bit from there until I have a story. All of it is true from the myths, but not exactly from the same one. Old Mother Sea Turtle. She lives forever. Now, all of the turtles live long, but she lives forever. And she was there when the world was new and all wet. And she swam, and she looked at all the beautiful colors of plants and animals. There's no place for me to go except on that few tall rocks to lay my eggs. All the turtles need a place to lay eggs. So she started gathering at the bottom of the ocean. She'd scoop it up. And over thousands of years, she created many islands. She went around and she poked in the bottom and volcanoes come up. Continents. All over the world. Now, he thought, as the plants started to move up on land and adapt, and a few fish went around, and she said, we need something. We need, well, I don't know what to call it yet, but we need it. And she went down and she got some clay, and she formed it, and she formed it, and she swam around. And of course, there was the beautiful red coral. She went and got some of those red coral fans, and she brought it down, put it in, added it in, got another one. Then she went and she got the bottle and she crushed it. She crushed it. She formed a heart. She put it right in the middle. Then she finished her statue. She dug it up to the land, put it on. She breathed life into it. And it arose. And it spread all over the place. She said, I think I'll call it a human. And she went on about it. She'd go up and she'd listen. When she was laying eggs, the moon was bright, she would think, oh, the sand is lovely, and she would go away. And she crawled up on the shore. The moon was out. The humans were out. And they were laughing and singing. But guess what? They were not telling a single story. They didn't know where they came from. They didn't know where they were going. Something wrong. So she got a plan. She went to an island, one of her favorites, and she went to where the kelp was, and she rolled once, twice. I knew that was going to happen. I stepped on it. Just a minute, it takes time if you're an old turtle. She emerged. There in the village, she saw the humans. She walked up. She was welcomed. Of course she was welcome. They were always welcome. They welcomed everyone. Well, she got them together and she started telling stories. She met a fine young fisherman. They moved to a hut on the beach. They had quite a few children. I don't know how many, but I know this. 7 of them were girls. And they sat by her side. They listened to the history of the humans. They listened to the future of the humans. They learned about humans they'd never seen before. They learned about their grandfathers and their grandmothers and their great-grandfathers and their great-grandfathers. They learned all the history. And when her oldest daughter became grown up and ready to move on to her own life, old Mother Sea Turtle said, come with me, come with me. She took her down to the sand and she said, my daughter, you are going to be charged with spreading all stories and telling all stories and teaching all the humans on a continent how to tell stories, how to pass on their cultures and their grandmothers, everyone. So she turned once, twice, 3 times. She had her daughter crawl on her back. And she swam. And she swam. And she dropped her daughter off on the beach of Africa. And her daughter went, spread stories. But most of all, she taught people how to tell stories. Mother sea turtle went back, turned around 3 times. I'm not going to do that again. And went up and onto the village. Slowly, one by one, 2, daughter 2, 3, all her daughters went to a different continent. She took her to different continents, spreading stories all over the world. But the last daughter took her down to the shore and she said, I can't send you to Antarctica. There's no point, but I will give you a chore. You are to go and spread stories on all of the islands throughout the world, especially these islands, and there are thousands of them. But first, I'm going to take you to a very special one, New Zealand. Get on my back. She went down to New Zealand. The old mother sea turtle swam back to her island. But as she was turning around, she said, you know, I'm immortal, but this human body is getting old. And so she shed it up on the beach. And she swam all the oceans. Now she was satisfied. Now, if you happen to be somewhere and run into her, old mother sea turtle, don't worry. It may not be. Turtles live long, but only old mother sea turtle is immortal. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. I have never heard that story before. Any of the variations that she said that she had taken from. Next, we are so lucky to have one of our own poetry members to come and share stories. Now, Max wrote that he's a writer, a magician, and a photographer. And he's always been interested in how the edges of these realms blend together. He has created an album of spoken word with music, photographs, and blended with poetry. You can find Max on Instagram. He also has a book in Amazon, as our own president does, and he has a few items for sale. So if you're interested, you can talk to Max. Let's welcome Max West. Inside this poem, he's doing this poem, he said is a very long poem, stretching into maybe a future book, but it's a long poem. So he's going to give us an excerpt of this. Inside the poem, Max West. Max.
Stand here on the silver line.
Yep.
Yeah, it's very meta. It's inside this poem. Yeah, sure. It's not. I wouldn't say it's a story though. I don't know what it is. As Nick said in The Big Chill, sometimes you just have to let the art wash over you. Yeah. The wind wraps these words, and were you able to cease the breeze, lines would lie fallen as leaves, flat as the plains between hills and valleys of breath. A cool gust, but not cold, probably for light brightening the tips of T's, shimmering atop steep-roofed M's, or caressing the domed O's. But don't be fooled by the sparkle of eyes. Windows are cluttered with curtains, cut with glass, shadows beneath ink. Yet onward letters march, ants bearing the sugar of time, All that space devoured for a tiny hill of meaning. Inside this poem is an infinitesimal grain around which a spiraling fractal recalculates. But mathematics are not why quantity exists. Poetry is for what's left after formulas are subtracted. Formless unemptiness, reaching for itself, which makes the poet at most a hand, and means there is a finger too, though the most beautiful points where it isn't. In that direction, we see the moon, silver soldered to midnight clouds, arrowing deep into a dark pond as flocks of rhythm glide overhead. Words are stars, awaiting alignment to be perceived as constellations. This is the best they can hope for, though they burn to be space, as angels inversely envy men, while so much brighter and more clear, a candle stuck to sun. Also, there is a man who rarely considers himself one, more often some swirling strangeness, stranger than any line could ever be. Poetry only a fold in his overcoat, but when words of others, false breezes blow in, he draws the lapels close, pulls seams from warm pockets and holds each thread up to starlight until gossamer glistens, and he is once again convinced until the cold no longer concerns. And lies. Lies are integral. If dirt, truth is fine. Or if plus and minus stretches into flesh, truth neutralizes with ethereal spine. If not for lies, poetry would either not need to be, or we would already embody. Yes, we are all in here somewhere. The invention of ink, mash of papyrus, the repeating decimal of an individual multiplying speech, divided by misunderstanding. Ah, and darkness without stars, fronds and fog, unseen reachings of massless creatures beyond. A prison with hidden key, a hologram with cryptic message, a 3D puzzle demanding you stare past the dots, a mandala carefully broken to edge you towards center, microscopic and telescopic, outstretching eyes, the pupils inside words looking into yours, an infinite succession of reflections, a road going nowhere it hasn't already been, while weather circles the landscape. My first poem, Love of the Feminine, our opposite, love of love, unsolvable enigma of a face. First man, first woman, a rose growing in the Eden of between, apple of lips, invisible thorn in a kiss. The dissonance of being drawn to that otherly scent of unseen organs, stumbling through wilds of fire, accidentally sneaking up on a fox, attempting to burn an indelible glimpse of the white crane on the sunny side of the lake. And after the petals dry and the crown rusts brown, when stems lie like broken swords on the battlefield across mouths, and neither of us quite crawled all the way through the brambles of what we needed to say, heavy with handfuls of unplanted before and after, pointless as tears that don't recall how to fall, fragile bridges of fragrance collapsing into breeze. With these words, the only path left, which once wound nearly all the way. Every fight which tried to prevent me from finishing these lines, the inexplicable why of their importance, the how they arise. A sleeping seed, that very first alignment in a crystal, the ridiculousness of invisible significance, of knowing they don't matter more than every other matter, while the mothers and jobs were constantly calling, partners yelling, with everyone at the cafe shouting, as the music screamed and silence while disease gave reasons and took away options, as death poked with a stick, while my mind explained madness and my spirit wasn't convinced, laughed with the phrase, blew wildly into the dust, hiding behind heat and cold, collecting every dark spark to forge this sword. I am in these words, of course, but am leaving while you have just arrived. Someday you may be more inside than I. And on that day, shaking hands and greeting goodbye, which matters less, whom the wardrobe fits or the sewer of thread. It may be easier to tell of what isn't here, as if you could hear the clink of treasure yet only see one coin, as if the magician slipped a heart behind your ear. The mountain of existence, an inverted pyramid, balanced upon the period at the end of this sentence. As loss bends the bars of the pen, the page, the screen, the lost pressurously breathes the walls of reality, sustaining their breakdown. A greedy God devouring his offspring of hours, a green goddess cracking skulls into flowers. Without the lost, neither of us would be looking to this page. The lost is the chariot clicking behind, forcing feet to move to the horse's beat. Just ahead, the lost is the oasis materializing amid a cloud of dust, its glittering mermaid whispering to lean one more degree. This didn't exist and now does. In reading, we reenact a miracle. What remains before existence, just a tiny bit, found its way onto a page. Even should we burn every paper, can never completely contain, for we have felt flame. That's what's really in here. Every inkling too late to unsay. Thank you.
Yes, good word for it. Powerful thoughts. Thank you, Max, for sharing. Our next storyteller just happens to be a retired teacher too. But I don't remember if you taught elementary.
Preschool.
Oh, preschool. He had the little ones. That was what I did.
Kindergarten.
And he is a valued member of our Sacramento Storytellers Executive Board. And he is our liaison to the California State Storytellers. Is it a guild? No, Storytellers Association. Association of California. So he is a gentleman with many hats, but he's a wonderful storyteller. And today he's going to share a story, My Beloved Jennifer. My beloved Jennifer, Ed Lewis. Ed.
During my biological mother's pregnancy in 1945, she was abandoned by her GI husband. She had two boys that were 2 and 4 years old, me on the way, and she was overwhelmed with no family support. She didn't know what to do. So she gave me up for adoption at birth. And fortunately, I was adopted by 2 loving and caring parents who provided a safe and secure environment for me the rest of my life. Now, I never forgot the unselfish act and the difficult decision that my biological mother had to make, or the unconditional love that my adopted parents provided me throughout my life. So as I delve into this story, I'd like all of you to think about people in your life that have provided you that necessary unconditional love. During my first year as a preschool teacher in 1977, I had the pleasure of meeting a precocious and intelligent 4-year-old girl, Jennifer, who became the leader of the pack of 24 children, 2.5 years old to 6. She would plan these extravagant tea parties inside. She'd come up to me and say, "Hey, teacher, we're gonna have a tea party. Can you get the fine china out for us?" She'd take the fine china and set it up. And of course, she'd already made croissants, just tasty croissants, biscuits and cookies out of our recent Play-Doh batch that we made. They would dress up in costume. They'd write invitations and send them around the classroom with pictures, everything. Outside on the playground, Jennifer and her 2 good girlfriends planned a weekly tricycle trip to Disneyland. We lived in Los Angeles. So they would decorate these tricycles and they would take off for Disneyland with her in the lead around our bicycle track. Well, one day she comes running up to me, teacher, there's a 7,000 pile crash of our tricycles on the Los Angeles freeway. I need the doctor's kit. Please get it, the hospital kit. So of course I got it out and she took out the bandages, the tape, the syringes, the stethoscopes, and with her 2 girlfriends, they set up stations. They took a staircase that we had built in our woodworking area, and she got the janitor crew to come and clean it off because that was going to be the main surgery center. They set up stations, maybe 5-6 stations around in the grass in our playground. And of course, she had to get the tow truck driving crew. So she gave them the chains and the tow truck drivers wrapped them around their tricycles. They went over to the sandbox where the tricycles had crashed and they towed those over to the car repair shop where they would repair the cars with all the tools they had, real tools. I even brought in brakes, real brakes and other parts and had them lubricated up so they could take them apart, put them together, do all those kinds of things. She also sent the ambulance crew over in wagons to pick up all of the injured tricyclists to bring over to the surgery center. It was a grand affair. Now, 2 years after Jennifer and her mother had left the program, they moved up to Davis, California from San Fernando Valley. It was the Woodland Hills. And this was at a college. It was a college child development center for parents that were going to college. So Lori had moved up here and her mother and started working for the deaf community. We had kept in touch and true love ensued, and I moved to Davis, and a year later, our son, Travis, was born. And it was a grand affair. Her mother was as grand affair type person as her daughter was. We planned a home birth. Now our parents weren't around, Lori's parents were passed, my parents weren't in the area. So she invited 10 of her best friends over, and we set up hay bales in the backyard under this beautiful oak tree, covered it with her favorite blankets and tapestries, had the fan going because this is July 27th and it was 110 degrees out that day in 1984. We had 2 midwives and they were both friends of ours, great people. We had the hospital route all set up, you know, we got 5 minutes, we could get her into the car, get her to the hospital. We already had her checked in case there was all the paperwork. So that was all set in case there was a problem. But we were very confident with the midwives, and Lori had already had 1 child. It was, well, no, she had 1 child. It was an easy birth. So 24 hours after her labor started, the midwives came to me and said, "Lori's having a party. We need to get this going. Get her in there. Let's have this baby." And Jen, with one of Lori's friends, had baked bread because her mother just loved the smell of bread. Well, by the end of this 24-hour period, we had 10 loaves of really great smelling bread. Well, Travis was born at 7:57 that evening outside. And Jennifer and I were there to get the baby from the midwife, and together with the surgical scissors, we cut the cord and watched Travis take his first breath. Jennifer's biological father had abandoned the family when she was 6 months old, never to be seen. But I just loved being a step parent. Now, Lori and I weren't married, so it wasn't official. So as a storyteller, I was teaching child development at a college at that point, and I had Fridays off, and I'd go into her school every Friday and share stories and do different kinds of things, dance and things like that. So I had a great experience with Jen growing up. Today, Jennifer lives in Davis, and she has a precocious and very intelligent 15-and-a-half-year-old girl who I've been teaching to drive, along with her father, of course. And it's been an experience, let me tell you. But she just bought a car. She's almost ready to take her final test. So she's ready to go. That'll be hell on wheels, I can guarantee you. And Jen also is very creative. She has a jewelry business. It makes really, really amazing jewelry. She has a great husband, wonderful family. Well, 2019 at Christmas, I gave her the most important gift I've ever given anyone in my life. It was a Christmas card that I wrote about how much I loved being her father and caring for her. And with it were papers that she unfolded. And as she read them, with tears streaming down my face, her husband's, and her daughter, her husband was filming this, she read court papers. And the court papers was a request for her to become, at the age of 45, my officially adopted daughter. Now, this is during COVID, so it took me a year to get this through the courts and in the system, because they had easy adoptions with paperwork for young children, but they had never done this for older people. So it was a process to get through. But we sent it in, and we had a Zoom ceremony. And the judge got on, he said, "This is fantastic. I've never done anything like this. I'm very honored to be able to do this." So he read the words that we had both been longing to hear, probably all of our, or at least all of our life together. He said, "Jennifer Wendt, do you take Edward Lewis to be your officially adopted father?" She said, "Yes, I do." And then he said, "Edward Lewis, do you take Jennifer Wendt to be your lawfully adopted daughter?" And I said, "Yes, with all my heart." And with those words and commitments of unconditional love, a couple days later, she gave me this poem that I want to try to read to you right now. It's entitled "Daddy." He chose me despite everything. The lost girl, the left girl, he chose me. The universe spoke, "You don't get one of those." He said, "Nope, yes you do. This one, me, right here." And he made me laugh, took me on adventures, made me try silly things, weird things. He's a weirdo, and so am I. I must get it from him, because he is it, the real one. Anyone can be a father, but it takes a real man to be a dad. My dad, he said, "I choose you, Jenny." And I realized that forever ago, my soul had already chosen him. Thank you.
I don't know about you, but I was almost choked up. I gotta hold back the tears. Wonderful story. I'm just going to give you a couple minutes. If anybody wants something to eat or drink, you can get up and grab something right now for 2 minutes, and then we'll start back up.
All right.
Oh, my Lord.
I'm still here. Hello?
They're just taking a break.
Oh, okay. I'm going to then turn my video off, but I'm here listening, okay?
All right, they'll be back in just a minute or so.
No problems. What do now?
Now to the second half of the program. We have another very experienced storyteller. Besides being on the board of the Sacramento Storytelling Guild, this, I call her young lady, her and I are about the same age. This young lady uses music and stories in a lot of her presentations, and she teaches drumming and music and storytelling to children. But Don't sit down, you're next. So our next teller is Angela James, and her title is Unforgettable. Unforgettable. Angela James.
So when I sort of came into this at the last minute because somebody almost died or something like that. Yeah. So, no, normally I'm the one who says, oh, you've been sitting for 45 minutes. Let's do something to loosen it up. But I see Karen took the prerogative and you guys are all loose and whatnot. But we are going to sing. So if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it, and you're grateful for the show, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. You're not going to win. The best in choir, but that was very good. No, and you need to show that you are happy after Ed's tearjerker. It was a real tearjerker. I've heard the story before, and it never fails to, okay, should I cry this time or not? Okay, yes. But anyway, when I got the title for this thing a couple of days ago, it said she had the theme, Surfs Up or summertime. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like, what did I do last summer? You know, those, when you go back to school, the things that, but I decided to take a different spin on it now, because when you live in a place where there are no discernible seasons, you know, you have, I lived in Homestead, Florida at one time, and you have hot and dry or hot and sweaty. Okay, those are the two seasons. But I'm in Homestead and I fall in with this group of ladies. Now, very nice, good looking ladies, like you, excuse me, gents, ladies, or belonging to this church. And they say that they're not doing New Age religion, but they're an alternative religion. So I get invited to go to down to the Keys because they have arranged this tour to a sweat lodge where they're going to sweat and where they can get connected with their spirit animal. Now, I didn't have to pay for it, so I went. The day came and this big passenger van comes up, you know, there are 10 of us get into this thing and we have a leisurely trip down. We didn't go all the way down to Key West, but somewhere, you know, 101, that meandering road, nothing there, maybe a little alligator. There are no little alligators, they're big, you know, they're big ones. So we finally pull off the road after driving for a couple of hours into this clearing. And we look around and there are a couple of little canopy tents set up. There's somebody cooking. There's some little touristy things hanging from some of the tents. And this is where we are having this sweat lodge. Now, I had in my mind an idea for sweat lodge. You know, I've studied indigenous cultures and whatnot, and you know, they abound in all over the place, especially Native Americans. So I'm looking around and don't really see anything that resembles a sweat lodge. Okay, but that's okay. So everybody's welcome. There are a few vendors selling jewelry and everything else, cold water. Because remember, this was August, hot and humid. Well, after we drink water, because these women were fasting, I was the only one who wasn't fasting. I'm like, not doing, I don't need to fast, okay? And so finally the time came and the person who is conducting this sweat lodge comes, gets us all together and talks a little bit about what we expect and everything. And everybody's dressed appropriately, long, loose dresses or skirts, because we're all women, And he says, well, we're going to go to the sweat lodge now. I'm still looking for it. But we head up in that direction, and there is a 30-foot Airstream trailer. The one all metal? Yeah. And he opens up the door to this thing, and this trailer has been gutted down to the studs. There's some stools in there, they're metal stools, and we all traipse into there, and we all sit down, and they're like maybe about 6 humidifiers, the vaporizers. That's, when your kids are sick and you put the Vicks vapor rub and letting off steam, the place is full of steam. Oh, and there's a heater in the middle of the floor. So we all go in there and it is hot. I mean, they must have been running this thing all night. It is hot. Now, outside was hot. This was hotter. And we all go in there and they pass around something that we all drink out of. It was pre-COVID, so, we didn't have to worry about that. We all take a drink of this, except me. I was afraid of catching something. And then we sit there and this guy, and he starts the chanting. And after a while, you lose all idea of time, because there's the steam, there is the heat, and I don't know what the others were thinking, but I'm thinking, if I don't get out of here soon, I'm going to be like the witch from Wizard of Oz. I'm melting. Yeah. So, but of course they tell you, if you want to leave, you can leave. Yeah, but we're sitting there and we're sweating, and something must be working. Maybe it's what they gave us to drink. Maybe it's people near to passing out. But you start hearing moans from members of the group, and some of them start chanting, then some. Now, I was feeling a little lightheaded. I had my own bottle of water and I was drinking that, trying to keep hydrated. And I'm like, I'm going to stick this out till the end. I have no idea again how long we were in there with people chanting and getting down on the floor and dancing in a 30-foot trailer, 10 people. So it was quite an experience. It was for me. I don't know about the others. But at the end of it all, as we all leave and we traipse out, and behind the trailer, there's an above ground pool filled with water. And I guess in the interim, we must have been in there 40, I can't tell. You have no concept of time when you're inundated with this heat and steam. But there's this big above ground pool, and somebody must have trucked in a bunch of ice and put in that pool, and we were all invited to go into the pool. I didn't. That was a sure way of getting some, I don't know, whatever it was. So we all get out of the pool and we're all prepared. We have beach towels and everything else. And we all go to a little place around there by the trees with some tops and we change into clean clothes and we come back out and, we sit there and we're supposed to talk about our experience in the sweat lodge, what happened, yeah. And so these women, and the young women, older women, middle-aged women, big women, little women, there are 10 of us, so, and they're talking about their experiences. And I'm shaking my head because I believe some of them because I've experienced the same thing. I've experienced fear. Am I going to die in here and they're never going to find me? I've experienced wonderment that people would pay a whole lot of money to come and do this. Remember, I didn't pay, but I knew how much it cost. Yeah. And, but for most of the people, it was a very positive experience. And the whole point, they were supposed to connect with their spirit animal. They were supposed to get a vision to see who their spirit animal was. And one by one, they talked about their spirit animal. This one was a snake. I hope it wasn't a Burmese python, This one was a deer. This one was a cougar. I mean, they all had these fancy animals. Now it gets to my turn. And so I tell about my experience. I says, I feel really, really rejuvenated, after doing all that sweat and my body feels light. I think I've lost 5 pounds that I wasn't supposed to. And I feel pretty good. And my spirit animal, I said, at the end, as I was thinking I was going to pass out, I opened my eyes and up the wall was crawling the biggest cockroach you ever saw. Florida has some big cockroaches. And I said, and right after I saw that, when I opened my eyes, I closed my eyes again and it was gone. Yeah. I said, I think that is my spirit animal. Needless to say, I never got invited again.
Oh, was that a wonderful story? Fun experience. Well, now we have our second, forgot to take it out. Our second poet, and her name is Jennifer O'Neill Pickering. Pickering. Did I say right? Pickering? Jennifer is a virtual and literary artist. Her new poetry book, Fruit Box Castles, Poems from a Peach Rancher's Daughter, is available from Finishing Line Press. She is a Pushcart nominee for poetry and a finalist in the New Woman's Voice chapbook competition. She is a literary and visual artist who taught art at college and in public and private settings, including a homeless shelter. Her art design, including poetry, was selected for the public art project at the Central Library in Sacramento in 2021. She also writes prose, and her short stories are published in the Arlington Literature Journal, Raven's Perch Pen Dust Radio and Elsewhere. And I love this title. It's caught my attention right away. Jennifer's title, Beach Walk at the End of Ward Road. Beach Walk at the End of Ward Road. Let's welcome Jennifer.
And I thought, oh, should I read this poem or should I read my beer poem? But I think my beer poem might be X-rated. So.
It's okay, we're all. We can handle it. Love that phrase.
Can I read the poem? Okay, I'm gonna read this Beach Walk on the End of Ward Road. It's, I wrote it like kind of at the height of the pandemic when my husband and I were going away a lot so we could get out in nature. And we like to go to this house just out of Fort Bragg. It's called Beach Walk at the End of Ward Road. Doesn't 1,000 baby blue eyes blinking from winter sleep make you happy? The gulls and ravens dipping feathery brushes in indigo, painting away flannel clouds. The waves cresting in a cycle pedaled by the silver wheels of moon. The beaches greeting atop her earthen home. Buoyant leap of deer across the lane. Where the meadowlarks call mates. Rain breaking nights. Relentless song. Poppies, golden hats, the wind blows over headlands. Your dogs unleash joy, reading ancient scents. This craftsman selling wooden wares, plovers, mermaids, and oyster catchers. The sun's loom weaving warmth. Your shoulders accept. The heart forgetting a year of loss and pain, this walk in nature eases. And this is, thank you. Yeah, it's short. And this is one I wrote, I was gonna read at a brewery, but I ended up getting COVID, so I didn't get to read. So wherever I read in the last few times, I've been reading this. And it's all beer making terms.
Yeah.
It's called My Lover Had Amber Hair. Barrel chested, was working on a beer belly. Smooth kisses made my heart hoppy. Too soon turned bitter. Tried dry hopping. That rubbed me the wrong way. We were volatile compounds, never to form a lovey bond. Just another bug hole. I prayed to Nikasi, the goddess of beer. Her answer, you need a cold break. I found another who enjoyed full body age. Wet hopping, didn't have warts or a husk to unpeel. Made me feel light struck and had a gravitational pull. Was the right package without prohibitions. We fermented well.
Very cute. Oh, I enjoyed both of your poems. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And we're so lucky that both of our poets were able to be here with us today. It's really nice when we get a chance to meet in person. The next storyteller doesn't get a chance to tell stories very often because he's always sitting back there. He's the technical person. But
Thank you.
I wanted him to come and be able to share one time. So I asked if he would do a story, and he's doing a story titled Summer of '73, our own president of Sacramento Storytelling Guild, And we are so lucky. Let's welcome Andy Loffer.
Thank you, everybody, for letting me tell you a story today. Summer of '73. I got a shout out to my sister here who's visiting. She's one of my biggest fans. And also a shout out to my buddy, John, who is here today listening. He is one of the subjects of the story.
Right.
So the summer of '73, my buddy John and I in high school, from the beginning of high school year, our senior year, we started planning a trip. We're planning a trip to New Jersey where his grandpa lived. We were going to be 18 on graduation. So our parents couldn't say a word about it. We were going to go, period. So we were really planning full speed ahead. The idea was to go in his nice, beautiful Mustang, hot Mustang, and take a week, drive to New Jersey, spend a week with Gramps, and drive back. We had $380 between us. Back then, if you're a responsible person, you could probably do that. We weren't very responsible as you're about to find out. So our first day, we didn't get very far. We got to Sparks, Nevada from Marin County. About a 3-hour drive. Already we're behind in our schedule. In Sparks, Nevada, there is a place called Mustang Dude Ranch. Anybody ever heard of it? It's a house of ill repute. Now, my buddy was experienced in this area. He had his virginal experience, and he wanted me to have mine. I hadn't had one yet. So we get there, and I'm going, what's this? And he's going, well, it's the Mustang Dude Ranch. I'm all, what? And he shoves me in the door. I had my virginal experience there as well. I learned a lot, but I'm going to leave it to your imagination to figure out what all that was. The whole summer was a whole series of learning experiences. Stayed there that night, and the next day we were on our way up to South Dakota. We wanted to see Mount Rushmore. Well, on the way, we heard about a party. This is a party called the Rainbow Festival back then. Bunch of hippies, kind of formed after, or thought of after Woodstock. That was the idea. Up in the Wyoming desert mountains somewhere. We didn't know exactly where, so we traveled for about 2 days before we finally found where it was. Unfortunately, it was the last day of the event, and music had already stopped. And there were people walking out of the, like this. It must have been a really, really wild party. I mean, we heard rumors of gallon jugs of water laced with acid, and I just can't imagine. But we got to go in there and camp for the night. And it was interesting that other young people like me and John were there as well. Now, I grew up in Marin County, the land of peacock feathers and hot tubs. You know what I mean? I thought everybody had the same perspective that I had on the world. I was shocked. These kids were from all over the United States. And they were filling our heads with ideas and their perspectives. And it was great. And that's really where I learned that people have different perspectives. They're not necessarily wrong, but they're different perspectives. What a valuable, thing to learn at 18 years old. Next day, we headed up to Mount Rushmore, and it was awesome. We got there finally. It was a long, long drive to get there, but we finally got there. And the mountainside was just incredible. That monument was incredible and a real feat of engineering. But what I learned there was at the beginning of the park, there was a protest going on. Native Americans were protesting the whole park. And so we stopped to talk with them, and they kind of filled us in. They said that, they kind of felt it was a desecration of their property. And so I'm really glad. I mean, it's still a wonder of a monument, but I'm really glad that I have that perspective, now to live with and to keep in mind when I go other places. So from there, we traveled southeast through the desert, the high desert. We traveled for hours, about noontime, baking hot sun, just crispy hot sun. We come to an intersection, in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a desert. On the other side of the intersection are two guys. One guy standing up hitchhiking, he can barely stand. The other guy is on the ground, he's not moving. So the least we could do was give them some water or something. So we stopped, we talked to them. It turns out they had been there for 3 days. The traffic was so scant, and when they did come by, they wouldn't pick them up. They were just burnt to a crisp, dehydrated beyond repair, but real almost. For sure they would have died had we not picked them up. So we made room in the car. And we had to carry the one dude. We had to carry him and put him in the back seat. And his buddy got in, scrunched in next to him, and he started, dribbling water into his mouth, just to, because he could barely move. And he's super chapped, skin flaking, everything. And so 3 hours later, we finally made it to a big city. And because of his friends' loving care, he was able to start walking, talking and everything, and sitting up. And so he was going to make it. We dropped him off at a medical facility, and then off we go. So by now, I don't know, we're 7 days into the thing, halfway across the country. We're way out of schedule here. But on the other side of town, we pick up this guy. There was a Native American guy who's all dressed up like a city slicker, all nice clothes and everything, black shoes. We pick him up, and he wants us to take him to the reservation, which is an hour or two out of the city. So he's talking to us. He says, "Yeah, I live out on the res, but I like to come over here for the nightlife and enjoy things. And, the res is a little boring sometimes, and so on." So we had a good conversation. It was fun talking with him. As we get out of the car, he's saying, "You guys look really pretty tired." He goes, "You want to buy some bennies from me? I got a pocket full of bennies here." That's Benzadryne, if you don't know what that is. And so yeah, sure. We want to stay awake, So we gave him some money, and we got a handful of bennies. We popped them. Off we go. They did not keep us awake at all. What they did was they gave us a severe case of diarrhea. Oh my God. 24 hours. He and I were stopping at every gas station. We were so uncomfortable. I was like, oh man, lesson learned. You better know who you get your drugs from. So we drop him off. We come across this other dude. You can remember, we're 18 years old, very young. This guy's he's an old codger. We figured he was an old codger. He had a red mustache like this and scruffy beard, red and gray beard, cowboy hat. He was probably about 55 years old. Plaid shirt, blue jeans tucked into his cowboy boots. He had a cowboy hat on with all of it. Anyway, he gets in the car. "Hey, how you guys doing? What's going on here?" So in about 3 minutes, he had us pegged for softies, right? "How old are you guys? Where'd you come from?" Whatever. He was funny. We had a good time with him. He made us laugh, and we took him to the next town, which was a good hour and a half away. By then, we're hungry, so we said, "We're kind of hungry. We're going to stop and get something to eat." He goes, "Oh, I got the perfect spot. He goes, just take a left up here and around here to the right." So he takes us to the back parking lot of a bar, one bar that he frequented apparently. He goes, "This is the bar." He goes, "Oh yeah, but they got food. I know the guy. He'll set me up. Give me your money, and I'll go in there and get your food." Okay, so we gave him some lunch money for all three of us. 45 minutes later, the guy comes out of the bar. He's in a great mood. He's he hands us both a sandwich. It's a bologna sandwich, one slice of bologna, 2 pieces of white bread each. And I'm like, "Where's the change?" She said, "Oh, that ain't no change. That's what it is. That's what it is." And I'm like, "Well, it took 45 minutes to get there. Oh, wait, it's real busy in there. You just can't believe it." Yeah. Lesson learned. Don't give your lunch money to a stranger. Oh, it was crazy. So off we go. Somehow we ended up down south, drove through Tennessee, drove through Kentucky, over the Blue Ridge Mountains, down into South Carolina, where we had some moonshine for the first time in our lives. I'm not going to get into that, but lesson learned. Don't drink moonshine. That was terrible. We finally get to Gramps' house. We called him Gramps. He lives on the top of a hill, up a mile-long driveway in a big old mansion. He was well-to-do. So we get up there 2 weeks after we left. We have $5 to our name. Okay, so we figured out, we'll ask the parents. We're young, 18, still innocent looking. We could probably talk the parents into sending us some money. Well, we got $5. Let's go into town and spend it. Okay, so down this mile-long driveway we go, into a place called Boonton. We bought a bottle of Southern Comfort. And we proceeded to take the rest of the afternoon and drink it. All of it. And so we were very, very drunk. And then it started to rain and it's getting dark. So we better get back because Grant is going to get worried of us. And so we get to the driveway and all of a sudden my buddy he decides he wants to be Mario Andretti, and he starts racing up the driveway. We're going around corners, screeching the tires, and it's wet, it's raining, right? So just at the top of the driveway, just before the mansion, we slide off the road and smash into a tree. The right fender, I ended up under the dashboard somehow. He ended up bending the steering wheel. The horn's blaring. Ah! It's late, it's nighttime. It's like we're gonna wake Gramps up, you know, he's gonna get really mad at us. So we get out of the car, open the hood, and we're trying to shut off the horn. It wouldn't shut off, so we start ripping out wires. Boom, finally the horn stops. And there's just silence and water and wet, man. The next morning, we were gonna pay the pipe. I knew that. So we had to get up, we had to go talk to Gramps, tell him what happened. You pinhead! He called me pinhead all summer long after that. It was such a dumb thing that we did. You pinhead. So we call our parents. This was another bad thing. Dad, can you guys send us some money to fix the car, come home? And then we told them how it happened, what we did. And they said no. We're like, what? No, you can't have any money. You made your bed, you sleep in it, get yourself a job, get the money you need to fix the car and come back home. Thank God we had Gramps there. He saved our butts because he let us stay at the house for free. Got us a job in this factory making these rubber pinch valves. I have a story about that. It's a whole nother story. Very interesting story. But what we learned on there is that, you know, one day you're going to have to pay the piper. You're going to have to pay what it costs you to screw up. So you better start being responsible. Thanks.
Woohoo! Good job, Andy.
Hey, John.
The summer, the unforgettable summer of '73. How great. Well, our last speaker is David Tarvin, but David forgot to send me his title, so he's going to have to tell you the title of his story. And David is a past board member of our Sacramento Storytelling Guild, and he has told in many different locations, and he definitely uses Zoom to tell his stories. So let's welcome David Tarvin.
Hello, everyone. My pleasure to be here. I don't really have a title to this story. It's just a story. But I got to tell you, I am beat. I mean, I am exhausted. I am tired. I just got back late last night from my annual looking for my lost mine trip that I take every summer. You see, 10 years ago, I bought a partnership in a mine. And I left the mine. I bought it actually when I was there, and I left, and I've never been able to find my way back because when I found the mine, I was lost. It happened 10 years ago in the deep winter, way up in the mountains by Lake Tahoe. Now, if you're not familiar with Tahoe, the snow there is very heavy. And I was out taking a trip with my snowshoes and stuff, just hiking out. It was just a day thing, right? I was hiking out in the woods through the snow, and I got to tell you, it was beautiful. And I had a great time. And I was pretty far out in the woods when all of a sudden, I saw this strange black shape, and it started to come towards me. And so I stopped and I was watching it. And as it got closer and closer and closer, I realized it was a wolf. Well, I got to tell you, I'm afraid of wolves. So I turned and I started to run. Now I thought, for some reason, maybe I could outrun this wolf. I don't know if you've ever ran in snowshoes, but it is not a good idea. So the next thing I know, I'm tripping and I fall down this big hill and I roll down the hill and I take off running, and it happened again and again. But I didn't see that wolf. The wolf didn't follow me. But by the time I stopped and kind of tried to get my bearings, I had no idea where I was. I was lost. And it started to snow lightly, and the sun was coming down. I started to panic a little bit, and I thought, just pick a direction and go. Sooner or later, you're either going to hit the freeway or you're going to wind up in the middle of the national forest, never to be seen again. Well, I just started walking. Pretty soon, night fell, and it was dark, and it started to get colder and colder. And I got exhausted, but I kept walking. Well, pretty soon, off in the distance, I saw this little light. So I walked towards the light, and the closer I got, the brighter the light got. And pretty soon, I found myself standing in front of an old cabin, and I knocked on the door. Well, this old man came to the door. Kind, sweet old guy, long beard, nicer beard than mine, long hair. And he invited me in. I told him my sad story, and he said, brother, you sit down, let me fix you a meal. He said, you could just spend the night and I'll take you tomorrow out to the main road. So he goes over to his little stove and he pulled out this trout. He fixed me this wonderful meal of fried trout, fried potatoes. And I'm telling you, that was the absolute best trout I had ever had in my life. I thanked him for the meal and I fell asleep on this cot because I was exhausted. And the next morning, early in the morning, I woke up. And he was already back at the stove cooking away. And again, he was cooking this trout. So we had eggs and trout and fried potatoes, a little bit of bacon, strong coffee. And it was wonderful. So I was thanking him and I said, you know, this trout is the best ever. And he said, well, I make my living off of that trout. I said, excuse me? He said, I mine trout. I said, you do what? He said, I mine trout. He said, and so I go out to this lake, I mine them, and then I sell them in the store. He said, it's only a winter occupation. And he said, but I make pretty good money at it. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. He said, I'll show you the mine. So I said, fine. So we finish breakfast and we walk out towards this lake. Now, it had snowed the night before and the lake was covered with fresh snow on it. And we walked up to the edge of that lake, just a small lake. And we walked out onto the ice. And we were probably about 30 feet out onto the ice, and he stopped and he started spreading that snow away. And then all of a sudden I saw it, there was this little rope, and then all of a sudden there's this wooden door, like a big piece of wood. He flopped it open, and it was like a hatch, and there were a set of stairs that were cut right into the ice that went down into the lake. It was all dark down there, and he just started walking down those stairs. So I followed him. Well, after a while, we get down into what I thought was some sort of chamber. It was pitch dark in there. And then I hear him strike a match. He lit this lantern, and the whole place lit up. And I got to tell you, it's beautiful. And I mean beautiful. It was almost like stained glass. We were in this big chamber. It was like 20 foot wide and about 10 foot deep. And the walls, the water was all frozen. And the light went into the ice and it reflected back, and it was beautiful. And that's when I noticed it. There were all these things in the frozen ice. And the old man walked over to this little bag and he pulled out a chisel and a hammer, and he walked right up to the wall. And then I saw it. There was a fish frozen in the ice, and he started to chisel it out. He had a basket right there, and he starts chiseling these frozen trout right out of that frozen water, and he puts them in the basket. Well, I was just amazed. And he turns to me and he says, you know, I did give you a free meal. You could help me. So I grabbed another chisel and I grabbed a hammer and I started chiseling away. And pretty soon, I too had filled up this huge basket full of these beautiful frozen trout. Well, we walked out and we packed them up to his house and he put them in this big freezer behind his cabin there. And then he drove me out to the road. And as we were driving, we were talking. I said, good God, dude, that's the best trout ever. You must make a fortune. I got to tell you, I am jealous. Then he turned to me and he said, you know, I'm getting pretty old. He says, I would sell you part of my mine for $5,000. I said, I happen to have my checkbook. So I wrote him out a checkbook right then and there for 49% of that partnership of that mine. And he gave me a little receipt. He dropped me off at the road. I had to hitchhike home. And I went back up a couple of weeks later, but I never did find him. And I never have seen him again. But I got to tell you that to this day, even 10 years later, I still have a hankering for that beautiful fried mine trout. And so every year in the summer, that's not as easy to get lost. I go up and look for my lost mine.
I love that title. I lost my mind. Oh, isn't that a great title? Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, let's give everybody a round of applause for job well done. I have a couple of announcements. Number one is to let you know that we are now switching back to our original time on the third Saturday. So we'll be back here on the third Saturday of the month rather than the fourth. That's because we always had conflicts with the holidays. So by switching back to the third, now we don't have to worry about Thanksgiving and Christmas. So just to let you know. And August, the third Saturday, August 20th, the third Saturday of the month. I just automatically, I write it down for my calendar for the whole year when the new calendars come. Do you know I already have 4 new calendars and it's in July and they've already sending me calendars? If anybody needs calendars, let me know. The other thing is to announce to you that your Sacramento Storytelling Guild has decided that they're going to have the first, we hope, annual Sacramento Valley Storytelling Festival. We know that Auburn has one, the Sierra has one, Berkeley has one. Why doesn't Sacramento? We're the oldest storytelling guild in California, and we've never had our own festival. So the board this year voted that we were going to attempt it, and we have been meeting regularly, and I can't believe the tellers we already have lined up. I'm so excited. Anyway, it's going to be May 20th, 2023, so it's a long way off, but May 20th, and it's going to be at the Dante Club. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Dante Club, but it's right off of Fair Oaks Boulevard. Howell is the closest street. There's a gas station